The boarding doors were closing when Michael Carter realized he had just ruined the biggest opportunity of his life. He stood frozen inside the airport terminal, one hand gripping his suitcase and the other holding a phone that showed the words, "Flight departed." 3 hours earlier, he had been on his way to New York for the most important job interview he had ever received. Now, because he had stopped to help a complete stranger, his flight was gone. His savings were almost gone, and the one chance he thought could change his life seemed to have disappeared with that airplane into the clouds. But sometimes, what feels like the worst delay in your life is actually the beginning of something you could never have planned. And if you believe kindness matters, if you believe second chances are real, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when one small act of kindness might change everything. Michael was 32 and living in Denver, Colorado, in a small apartment above a bakery. He had spent years working his way upward, taking every extra shift he could find, while studying business management at night. His father, Thomas, had always told him that a person's character was revealed when nobody was watching. Michael had carried those words with him since childhood, especially after losing his father unexpectedly 2 years earlier. Since then, life had felt like a long series of doors closing. His mother, Margaret, needed financial help. His rent had increased, and the company he had worked for suddenly downsized him after 7 years of loyal service. Then, almost miraculously, he received an invitation to interview for a management position with a respected company in New York. The salary could change everything. Michael had only enough money for one flight, one hotel night, and one chance. On the morning of his flight, Michael arrived at Denver International Airport early, dressed in his best Navy suit and carrying a worn leather briefcase that had belonged to his father. He kept checking the time because the interview was scheduled for the following morning. He was nervous, but beneath the nervousness was a quiet excitement. For the first time in years, he could imagine life becoming easier. He could help his mother, he could pay his debts. Maybe he could finally stop worrying about every dollar. Then, near the security checkpoint, he noticed an elderly woman sitting on the floor beside a small suitcase. Her name was Ruth Bennett, and she looked frightened. Her hands were trembling as she stared at her phone. She had missed her connecting flight. After becoming confused in the enormous airport, she had no idea where to go. And worse, she had fallen earlier and injured her ankle. People hurried around her, some glancing briefly before continuing toward their gates. Michael looked at his departure board. His flight was boarding in 20 minutes. For a few seconds, he stood there fighting with himself. He knew exactly what he should do if he wanted to protect his own future. Keep walking. Someone else would help her. Airport employees were nearby. He could not afford to miss this flight. Then, he remembered his father's words. Character was revealed when nobody was watching. Michael placed his briefcase on the floor, crouched beside Ruth, and asked if she was okay. He helped her reach the airport assistant's desk, carried her suitcase, found a wheelchair, contacted her daughter, and stayed until he knew she was safe. By the time Michael finally looked at the clock, his boarding time had passed. He ran through the terminal anyway, suitcase bouncing behind him. But when he reached the gate, the door was already closed. Through the glass, he watched his plane disappear from the jet bridge. Michael stood there, breathing heavily, feeling a crushing mixture of anger, fear, and regret. He had done something kind, but kindness had cost him the one opportunity he desperately needed. That night, he slept in a cheap airport hotel, staring at the ceiling while calculating how little money remained in his bank account. He called the company and explained what had happened. To his surprise, the recruiter told him they could not guarantee another interview. Michael hung up feeling defeated. He wondered whether his father had been wrong. Maybe doing the right thing was not always enough. Maybe good people still lost. The next morning, Michael returned home to Denver, with his suitcase still packed. He spent the next 3 days applying for jobs and trying to convince himself that missing that flight had not destroyed his future. On the third afternoon, while sitting at a small coffee shop near his apartment, he received an unexpected email. The company in New York wanted to reschedule his interview. Michael stared at the screen in disbelief. There was no explanation, only a new date, time, and office address. 3 days later, Michael walked into the company's elegant office, wearing the same navy suit. His palms were sweating as he entered the conference room. 2 executives sat at the table, along with the hiring manager. Then the door opened behind him. Michael turned around, and his heart stopped. It was Ruth Bennett, the woman from the airport. She walked into the room with a gentle smile, her ankle now wrapped in a support brace. Michael could barely breathe as she looked at him. She was not simply an elderly traveler. She was the company's founder and chairwoman, the woman who had built the entire organization from nothing. She had been returning from visiting a family member when Michael helped her at the airport. She had remembered his name from the assistance report and had asked her team to find out who he was. Ruth smiled at him, and suddenly Michael understood why his interview had been rescheduled. She had not recommended him because he helped a powerful person. She had recommended him because she had watched him make a difficult choice when he had absolutely nothing to gain from it. The interview became less about perfect answers and more about who Michael was when life became inconvenient. He spoke honestly about his struggles, his father's lessons, his mother, and the fear that had followed him since losing his job. He admitted that missing the flight had terrified him. Ruth listened carefully. At the end of the interview, she offered Michael the position, but that was not the greatest gift. She told him that the company had a tradition of giving employees opportunities to help others, because success meant very little if you reached the top alone. Michael accepted the job, but he never forgot the airport. Years later, when he became a senior executive, he still carried his father's old briefcase to important meetings. Inside, it was a small photograph of his father and a handwritten note that said, "Do what is right, even when it costs you." Michael eventually helped his mother move into a comfortable home. He paid his debts. He traveled, built a successful career, and became the kind of leader who noticed people others overlooked. But whenever someone asked him about the turning point in his life, he never mentioned the interview, the salary, or the promotion. He always talked about the flight he missed, because Michael finally understood something that changed the way he lived forever. Sometimes we think we are late because God has delayed us. Sometimes we believe a door closed because we were not good enough. But there are moments when the closed door is protecting us from a path that was never meant for us, while another door is quietly opening somewhere else. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may need a little hope today. And before we end, I want you to answer one question in the comments. Have you ever missed an opportunity that later turned out to be a blessing in disguise? Tell us your story. Someone reading your comment may be going through the same thing right now. Michael once thought he had missed his flight. In reality, he had simply arrived at the right destination a little later than expected. And sometimes the greatest blessings in life don't come from the opportunities we catch. They come from the ones we miss while helping someone else.